Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today we're going to interrupt the previously scheduled programming to talk about some recent market updates. Now I had initially planned to make a video on Bitcoin today. I'll probably just end up kind of pushing that back probably to later in this week, just because we have seen obviously a lot of interesting things going on in the market recently. Everything has kind of crashed a little bit. I would say not to the same degree that we saw in early August, but definitely enough to kind of induce some worry, I would say, in most people. And so I wanted to just create a quick video talking a little bit about that and maybe doing a little bit of research, looking at the chart, a lot of these different types of things to, figure out have things fundamentally changed within the market. Because ultimately, as we've talked about on the channel, things are pretty bullish overall, right? Long term, I don't see many fundamental issues in the market. So unless something has changed at a fundamental level, I don't really see any reason why we would be scared. And this would be more as an opportunity to pick up some crypto at a discount. So that's ultimately what I wanted to go through today. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So starting out, looking at the crypto bubbles, we can see pretty much everything is red, right? I mean, we've got Solana up here down 6.1%. We can see Ethereum 5.7%. We've got Bitcoin down here. It's actually hidden by my picture, but it's down 4.2%. I mean, we've got tons of projects down 10% almost across the board. I mean, there's a lot of selling going on today, right? I think that's kind of expected, I would say, given the uncertainty within the market. Is it reasonable? I don't know, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and figure out kind of if it is reasonable. Before we get into that, let's look at the Fear and Greed Index. So as we can see, if we were to shorten down this time frame, we were sitting in greed for a couple days. We've since started to pull back down. We're sitting at neutral right now. I would imagine after the selling that's gone on today, this will be very much within the fear zone. I don't think it's too unexpected. Do I think it's maybe a little bit unreasonable? Sure. But a lot of the selling that's going on right now, I kind of understand, but I also kind of don't. And this is something that we're going to continue to talk about a little bit further on in the video. So for those of you who haven't heard or maybe aren't aware of why crypto has kind of pulled back so dramatically today, Iran has actually launched ballistic missiles into Israel and actually since declared a formal state of war on the state of Israel. And so, obviously this is not great news from a global stability perspective. However, it still remains to be seen what this actually means, right? I mean, you could argue that Iran and Israel have kind of been in a sort of proxy war with each other, certainly since last October. And I mean, I think you could even make the argument that it was maybe even long before that, basically ever since Israel was ever created. And so, I'm not here to speculate on kind of anything like that, but I think kind of the larger concern is that this could have kind of kicked off World War III, right? And if that is the case, that is obviously not great for a lot of these risk on assets, just because we will be in a risk on time. And so I would imagine that, crypto would probably see a decent bit of pullback, probably more than a decent bit of pullback. And, it's something where some of these people who are selling today may look like geniuses, right? I'm not totally convinced that that's what's going to be happening. But it's a possibility, right? Anything is possible. I am, one, not a geopolitical expert, and two, I'm also not a future teller. So, that would be kind of the two things that would be required in order to actually come out with a right assessment on the matter here. Ultimately, all I can do is speculate on where we're at currently, the fundamental background of Bitcoin, what we've seen historically with some of these tensions in the Middle East, things like that. And so from my perspective, I don't think anything has necessarily fundamentally changed with what we're looking at within the wider crypto market. Obviously, yes, there's a little bit of fear. There's a little bit of uncertainty. A lot of us or I was hearing whispers, I guess you could say. I was hearing whispers at the end of September that we potentially could be seeing some sort of black swan type of event. I would say that this probably qualifies as that. I wouldn't say that we've seen a sell-off that would necessarily make it a super bad black swan event, but it is something that I would say it qualifies, right? And so depending on how long this continues, how bad it gets, a lot of that type of stuff, I think will depend on how far crypto goes down. Right now, I'd say, this is a relatively minor-ish, if you could call it that, correction that we've seen plenty of times before in crypto. So it's not anything too concerning to me. As far as this being, the start of World War III or whatever, I don't know if I really buy that, just because I feel like for there truly to be a world war, there would have to be a couple other key things that were to happen if something like that were to take place, which obviously have not happened yet. Also, the whole Israel and Iran thing kind of needs to be played out a little bit further. We have seen in the past, I mean, I think they did this in March, I believe. They launched a missile and drone strike into Israel and then called it a victory, right? And then didn't do anything. This attack obviously was much greater in volume, so maybe something has changed. Like I said, I don't know. I think there's still time that needs to pass before we figure it out. But ultimately, as far as this impacts crypto, obviously it's going to impact like the general sentiment. We were in a state of greed, so we could see that people were starting to get a little bit bullish. I think this is starting to bring the market maybe a little bit back down to parity. Like I said, it's a black swan event, so it's a little bit unrelated, but I do think it takes a little bit of like the steam out of the market a little bit, which is good. So heading back into the crypto fear and greed index, we do see that it is starting to pull down. As I mentioned, it wouldn't surprise me if we head back into fear or extreme fear. Now, looking at the liquidations, we can see something kind of crazy. We've seen almost $500 million liquidated in the past 24 hours. I actually looked at this a little bit earlier for our earlier video that we did today, and this was half of that. So this is since again doubled, and we've seen just an absolutely monumental amount liquidated out of both Bitcoin and Ethereum, as well as others. And I would assume this is kind of an accumulation of everything that's not all of this stuff that's like distinctly mentioned. But we can see kind of overall, it still does play pretty dramatically toward liquidating longs. And so this is something that I think makes a little bit of sense. Obviously the market was very bullish. We've seen price come down a lot. And so obviously when price comes down, you're going to be liquidating longs. If we do look at the chart, we can see, we've had some pretty big wicks both ways. And so I think it's doing a pretty good job of, kind of liquidating everybody. But if we can look, the structure that we're showing here is relatively untouched still, right? Like obviously we bounced off of the top of this, which as I kind of mentioned, I expected was probably going to happen. As I mentioned in the videos, I wasn't certain. There was always a possibility that we could have broken out of this, but once we started seeing wicks, I figured we'd probably see at least a little bit of a pullback. I wasn't necessarily thinking something like this would happen, but like I said, this is not financial advice. I have just as little of ideas what's going to happen as you do. So, seeing two kind of mega red candles was definitely not on my bingo card, but it is kind of a pullback all the same, kind of like what we were expecting. We haven't even hit the middle of this channel yet. I do think, as I have been mentioning for, I think probably almost over a month at this point, I do think it's a possibility we reach back down into this. I do think we do kind of have the momentum that we would need to get back down to this level. It would not be ideal if we did, just because we would break this kind of like higher high, hopefully setting up for a higher low type of perspective. So I think ideally we'd want to settle kind of somewhere in this range, kind of at the lowest, I would think. Even, up in here would be good as well. If that doesn't happen, like I said, it is a possibility that we come back in, kind of hit this liquidity zone, touch the bottom of this channel, and then, hopefully continue and move up from there. But if World War III does end up materializing, then, potentially we could be moving all the way down. So, there's a lot to be seen here. There's a lot of uncertainty within the market still. But overall, nothing, at least in my mind, seems to be fundamentally unchanged with like my analysis of the market, right? We knew some pullback was going to happen. It happened. Obviously, it happened, maybe a little bit more dramatic and aggressively than we would have expected. But that doesn't change the fact that it's still kind of doing what we expected it to do, right? And so that's something that I'm kind of hanging my hat on, at least for now. If something like that changes fundamentally, I do try very hard to keep my mind open to all possibilities. And so if I do see something that kind of starts to fundamentally change, I will let you know, and we can reassess it here on the channel. But ultimately, as I mentioned earlier today as well, I did take a short here. I closed it out kind of, I think, in this area, just because we were starting to see maybe some more potentially bullish pressure before this whole Iran-Israel thing happened. What we can see is, I pulled one trade doing over 300% and then another trade doing just under 200. So, not too bad. If I would have, again, if I would have been able to predict the future and known this was going to happen, it'd probably be well over 1,000% at this point. But hey, we're not looking back on what could have been, just because things happen. Like I said, I don't know how to predict the future. A lot of being consistent with trading is being consistently profitable, right? And so, in my opinion, I would rather take a couple 200-300% plays over one moonshot to 6,000% or whatever, just because those are a lot harder and also a lot less predictable. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. If you are interested in trading Margex, I do have that link in the description below. like I said, no KYC, no VPN. They do offer up to $10,000 in deposit bonuses as well. So if this is something that you're interested in doing, feel free to give it a try. As I've said, leverage trading is definitely not without its risks. It can be very, very, dangerous to do, particularly in a place like this. Obviously it would be nice to, maybe catch the wick and maybe it runs all the way back up. Then yeah, of course, you're gonna, look like a genius. But if you're trying to do that on, 100x leverage or something like that, odds are you're gonna get wrecked. I mean, you might get lucky, but odds are you're probably gonna get wrecked. So I would say, especially until we need to essentially kind of find some level of support before I look to take any other types of trades. So I'm kind of sitting on my hands right now. I'm not letting FOMO get the best of me. One of the difficulties when you're trading leverage or even just like doing more advanced types of trading is you can trade the downs as well as the ups. And so sometimes you can get a little overzealous and want to trade both ways. And, knowing when not to trade is just as important as knowing when to trade. So that's just something to keep in mind. But, as we can see from the chart here, everything looks pretty good overall. I'm not really all that worried given kind of the fundamental price action of things yet. If we look at the liquidation levels, we're always going to keep coming back to this because until it stops working for me, there's just no reason not to use it, right? And so what we can see is we have obviously flipped back to liquidating shorts, which would indicate a move to the upside. We are also seeing confluence between all three time frames. We can see, the 1 and 7 days particularly, we've got a ton of shorts loaded in. The 30 days still not as lopsided as I would want it to be. We can see that, longs are liquidating shorts is right about 7 billion and then liquidating longs is like 6.4. So definitely still, fairly evenly spread. I do think that, maybe we potentially see something come back to like, maybe we break 60,000 and liquidate some of these shorts and then we start to see a run up. However, we have started to see some confluence that I would expect to see to take a trade, and obviously it would be a long trade given that the money says that we're going to liquidate shorts. So if that were to happen, like I've said before, I'd want to look to find some level of support here, just because trying to do a leverage trade with this type of volatility and no real like structure defined yet is very, very dangerous. So I would strongly recommend against that. However, nothing I say is financial advice, so you can make your own decisions and do what you want there. But ultimately, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. I know, some people are like, oh, well, I don't care about global events or whatever because I just like crypto. And yeah, that's great and all. But as we can see by the red candles today, global events do very much impact crypto. I would say, maybe a little bit more outsized than other markets just because it's a more volatile asset. And so, we do need to be aware, at least to some degree, right? And so that's kind of what I wanted to show today, is that there is a level of awareness that we can have while still, kind of focusing on crypto and making sure that it's relevant to, the subject matter that we care about. So hopefully this was useful and relevant. If it was, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really, really does help me out. I still am trying to hit that 10,000 subscriber goal by the end of the year. Who knows if I'll be able to do it or not, but that still does remain to be my goal. Also, if you have any comments, questions, feedback, whatever, please feel free to drop that in the comment section below. I do really enjoy reading and also responding to all of your comments. A lot of you have really good insight and input that I do like, hearing from and reading about. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.